I don't know if you remember, New Zealand had this outstanding 7 called Josh Cronfeld, you know.
Oh, yeah,
I used to wear the scrum cap, running around thinking I was Josh Cronfeld and playing for J5.
Niall Savage, welcome to Throwing Stones. How are you?
Jeremy, an absolute honour to be here. Fair play to you for doing this. Can't believe we're actually sitting down over Zoom and having to chat, but really looking forward to this. Fair play to you.
Great stuff. No, absolutely delighted to have you on. It's actually Valentine's Day as I record this. And I can think of no more romantic way to spend it than talking with you about Greystones Rugby Club.
Well, Jeremy, we've had a fiery relationship over the years as competing captains, passionately stealing players off each other. So what a way to spend Valentine's in
Absolutely.
lockdown.
Very, very apt. You've been, I was thinking just before I hit record there, like you have probably been the longest active player in the rugby club. I don't think there's anybody else still playing that's been putting on a Greystones jersey quite as long as you have. But it wasn't always that way. Before you were in the green and white of Greystones, you were wearing the beloved white star of St. Mary's. And also I think the purple and navy of De La Salle. That might shock a few people. What happened there?
Well, I can honestly confirm there'd be no former records of those matches, Jeremy, because such things didn't exist. I'd say back in the day, I had no car, so you went where you trained whoever would pick you up. Sloper took me out to De La Salle a few times, and I got a few runarounds with them. Started the development of my complete hatred for them on the pitch. That and the fact that they stood me a few times in training. And likewise with Mary's, that was just a couple of social games as well. But it wasn't long before I saw the light and got home, actually got a car. But when you were in college back then, like to get to UCD, you had to get a dart to Sydney Parade and a bus up and everywhere else, and nobody was really travelling back to Greystones. So it was more down to the chance to get a game anywhere that would take me. J8s, 9s, 10s, anything, under 20s, under 18s. I'd turn out if I could.
Very good.
Glad I never, that was it,
Did you play underage rugby? Like, what was your first instances like with the sport?
I went to Pres Junior School back when there was a junior school. Okay. So I started playing at 5 in the junior school, played all the way up, and actually played very little rugby for Greystones in youth. Phil Mooney was a coach for us there, and he sort of told us a few porcupines back in the day to show up for a Pres game, and we ended up playing for Greystones a couple of times. I remember him doing that. He'll deny that to the day he dies, I'd say. But anyway, that was probably, I had very limited involvement in Greystones. My uncle played seconds anyway, and maybe a bit of firsts. But it was all Pres until when I was sort of at the youth level, yeah.
Right, okay. On your Pres days, you're literally the most robust player I've ever come across. I don't think I've ever known you to be injured, but you did have a pretty bad injury in school, isn't that right?
That's right. It wasn't an injury. The robustness comes from never having made a tackle in about 20 years of playing. So that's where that comes. But I'm an outstanding pillar at the side of a ruck, Jeremy. I actually had a disease called Schumann's disease when I was 16, and it made my vertebrae go wrong. So I just about got a junior cup run. And then by the time I was in sort of 5th year, there was just a nagging pain in my back, nothing to do with rugby, thank God. But it just meant that actually scrummaging and lifting and things like that just weren't a runner. And I thought, look, that's it, I'm done, and sort of went on and studied and sort of tried to put it out of my mind. And actually it was very hard watching the lads go through and play senior cup and all that, when you knew you weren't able to, and I wasn't able to play soccer or anything. And then the doctor always told me it had healed, and I probably just didn't believe them. And by the time we got to 21, 22, it was right as rain. And looking back, it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because on the one hand, I actually studied for my Leaving Cert, which I may not have done had I been playing rugby the whole time, because that was definitely my first love rather than studying maths. And secondly, then, because by the time I got to 22, sort of 23, and coming back to Stones, I hadn't played rugby in 7 years. I was like an animal for it. I just couldn't wait to get in the pitch. I'd have played 3, 4, 5 games a week if you'd let me, So I never was over rugby. To see a lot of them now, by the time they get to 20s, they're fed up with it. So that never happened to me. So it's probably why I'm still playing, because it sort of got taken away from me for a few years,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't know that. So eventually you did find your way down to Greystones, snaking via Temple and
UCD as well. Actually, I played a few games.
Oh,
for
and
them.
well,
as a banger. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Never played for the gift.
Yeah, okay. Eventually, you did find your way down to Greystones. You told me once it was as a back row. I don't know. Was I dreaming? Is that true? You actually were in the back row.
Yeah, that is true. Over the course of my career, Jeremy, I've been a yo-yo dieter, as you know, mostly up, but the odd time I came down. And by the time I came to Greystones, Ricky Wogan had asked me to come down, and he didn't really know me that well. So I thought I'd kind of give it a shot and play in the back row. You know, I think I was playing J5s then. And of course, they just wanted players. They were delighted. So I actually got nearly half a season on the back row. And my older brother, Olin, who we all know now coach for the first, sort of, to be fair to him, kept stum about it, because he sort of was going, how the hell do you get away with this, you know? And scrum cap on, running around the pitch. But eventually, sort of, everyone, you know, eventually found out who I was and all that. And it wasn't hard to see either that really I was a prop, you know, at heart. And also the weight loss was quite temporary as the season went on, and the banter in the dressing room, the gut started building as well. So I was kind of happy to return to the front row. But Ricky migrated north and stayed there, unfortunately. But Ricky can't believe that I managed to pull the wool over his eyes, got a whole half a season as back row, and I came back to the club. It was a wonderful experience.
He wouldn't know any different.
Well, I did want to say, I could have told him I was an out half. I just got to run it. So at the time, I don't know if you remember, New Zealand had this outstanding 7 called Josh Cranfeld, you know. I used to wear the scrum cap, running around thinking I was Josh Cranfeld and playing for J5, like absolutely crap, you know. It's like, it's great. Just really lovely. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. I know your brother Olin was involved in a very, very good J2 team that were hugely successful. Were you kind of in and out of that team? I can't really remember. You told me a story about a cup final or something like that.
I never made the final, mate. I got into the odd picture for the final, as you would, you know, try and sneak your way in. But I was, because Olin was my older brother, and as anyone who knows Olin could quite easily tell you to do something, and you'd probably do it. I was definitely on the bench an awful lot, and even got the odd game for them. But it was usually when some of the more high-profile players maybe had a heavy evening the night before, maybe, and didn't make the team. So I'd be called at the last minute, all delighted to be called up to be playing with these gods of rugby. Hopefully Dula won't listen to this. He'll think I was saying God of rugby. But yeah, I got a fair few runs out of that. Then I come down to the J4s going, I was playing for Tuesday the weekend with a big win against Marys. You know, I shouldn't have been even on the pitch. But and even managed to get sort of around the car park for a few finals. And of course, once you're around the car park, you'll always sneak in for the photos.
Yeah, that's very good. You were on a very good J4 team. Was it Barry Keogh captain? Was that kind of your early rugby, your first couple of seasons of Greystones? That kind of time frame.
That's absolutely right. Like these guys, and they're still around the club. A lot of these guys, like there was, when I came into the club, like I think we had an awful habit of losing finals to Terranure. But we had a super team, and we were like, Greystones were just so strong at junior section back then. Like, you know, my first game for Greystones was actually as a 19-year-old playing on a J8s team, would you believe? Like we were just such a strong. I'd love to get it back to those days. I don't know if we will, but oh yeah, like and the 3s and 4s, like you were literally told you're on Sunday today for the 3s or Saturday for the 4s, but they always got to finals, and there was always this thing that, like, it was just inevitable. Whichever team were going strong, going to the finals, tended to get the better bounce of the ball at player selection meetings as well. Back in the days, again, when records weren't as stringent.
Bookkeeping wasn't the same.
Bookkeeping wasn't the same, Jeremy. So you might find if you were going well, you might find you got a better run for the J3s than you did for the J4s.
Yeah.
But there was a sensation here. We won a fair few leagues. I remember there was always a player that dominated, or one or two players. You get great guys coming in. I remember the year Paul Daniels was captain, or he wasn't captain, he was certainly driving that. You may have played for that, maybe just before.
I didn't play with him. I know. You seen him about.
Yeah. Great J3 team himself, and I think it was Jay Mullins and Trev. They put together an absolute hit squad of a J3 team. And likewise, then I think one of my second years, we just sort of lost to College of Surgeons, Ben Finnegan, through an intercept pass that lost us the entire league that day. Never forget it. Former PRO of the club. And then the guy came out who actually played international rugby for Luxembourg, right, called Barry O'Sullivan. And this guy was just incredible. I think he only really played one season for us, and he was the best. Like, I remember him in press as well. He was an animal of a human being. And we won the league. He was the difference between not winning the league and winning the league. You get a guy like that, and he just lifts the whole team. And that was my first medal. And it was entirely down to him. I say my first medal because I got to the quarterfinals and they kept me on the bench for the rest of the time, just about clinging on, because I think I was technically vice captain. And you come into the dressing room on a quarterfinal, and you're sitting there. Then you see the likes of Mick Hanley and Gussie O'Hanlon and lads like that walking in. You go, yeah, not playing today. I'm off.
Would you find that out in the dressing room back? Because of course there wasn't a text or an email going around or whatever about team selection. Would you just find out?
No. Yeah, there was sort of. Do you ever see sort of the way the popes were sort of elected back then, Jeremy? There'd be sort of the lads.
I'm actually a member of the Church of Ireland, Niall. So I.
Oh, sorry, excuse me. Well, I'm sure you make your own selection processes there as well. But I always felt, and this is before I was sort of involved in the inner sanctum, that there was, it was similar to selecting a pope. Selection would go on Thursday, and white smoke would lift, and then all of a sudden you'd find out on Saturday morning that there was other superstar players who were being drafted in who just happened to be available at the time. So at that stage you were just hanging on to make sure you could stay on the bench and get your medal, even get a little bit of a run as well. But that was quite frequent back then. And certainly some of the talent that was playing was pretty epic as well.
Yeah. Did you ever play with Willie Byrne?
Oh yeah. Willie was the I'd say Willie and Dwayne Kelly were probably the two icons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Icon. Yeah. Don't tell them. Oh God, they're going to hear all about this. Now, Willie, I don't mind. Dwayne Kelly, I can imagine his head going. But anyway, they were the two main guys in the J4s. I think there's plenty of other good players like Joey and all, but they were definitely the driving force. And actually, Willie was the captain that year. We lost to College of Surgeons when Ben Finnegan cost me my first league medal. And Willie was he was a colossus. Like, he was just such a great.
What was it about him? I mean, you hear
captain.
Like, he is mythical. Like, it's like I've heard stories that I don't know are true. Because they're
all true. They're all true.
So was that team? So you had Willie Byrne, Dwayne Kelly. Did you also have Mick Murray? That'd be right.
No, I'd say Mick was just coming back into the team just a couple of years after that. Okay. No, Mick would have been just probably a season or two after. It definitely wasn't on that team the year Willie was captain.
Right.
Willie's the only man I know to get sent off in a final and get his band lifted, sent off in the semi-final and got his band lifted in the final as well. Which
he paid a visit to the Leicester branch late at night.
Tony Tierney was he was the greatest defence lawyer of all time. At a disciplinary hearing, you could be called a Matlock, or in a modern day maybe Harvey Specter, but I don't know how he did it. But Willie arrived after I'd say he would say a very harsh red. I'd say it was, in today's day it was probably justified, right? But yeah, he made it. But it was he was a wonderful captain, and I tell you what Willie was. He would treat a fella who couldn't play the game the same as a fella who was a superstar, and he made you feel, no matter who you were in the club, that you were just as welcome in the place. And I think that's the great. So people, if they didn't get a game for him, still showed up and would die in a ditch if they got selected. That was his real strength,
Absolutely. You told me once that it was a training. You were going to training and you were late, and you were so nervous that you were going to be late for Willie that you said you were sweating on the drive down. That's right. True?
That's right. Yeah, that's absolutely true. That faded pretty quickly by the time I had a couple more seasons. My training, intensive training became more sporadic. But certainly when you were coming to you were coming to the sort of the business end of a season, like, you just.
Is it the environment that Willie would create? Is it?
I don't think he even tried. You just wouldn't want to let him down. I tell you what it was as well. If you told him you couldn't come because of work, you were probably okay. But if you told him you were coming and you didn't come, to the team had let you know anyway, and you were trying to do a team run, before a final or a couple of weeks coming into a final, or get a cup run together or something like that. Yeah, you just, if you promised someone you were going to be there, and if you promised someone that you really respected you were going to be there, you damn skippy were going to be there, Yeah. I do remember being in a couple of meetings, and I was on my way up in my career at the time going, how am I going to do this? I have to get out of here. If I don't get out of here soon, I'm brown bread here, As I said, Jeremy, over the years that definitely faded to the point.
Yeah.
Saying this, not around. Mike should make the weekend.
Once you got comfortable in your seat, you didn't really have to move too far. You've kind of touched on it already, but like, what was the junior section like back then? Like, for guys like me, my dad played. And I would have heard a lot about, a J5 game or a J6 game. It's kind of, a modern player now wouldn't really believe you almost that there was J567. Willie Byrne told me once he played J8Bs. Like,
yeah.
why was it so vibrant? Why were there so many people there? And like, what was it unique to Greystones, or was that across the board?
No, not really. Not really. Like, I think Greystones had a very unique junior section. There's no doubt about that. I still think it could and does in many ways, right? And my own first game at a level was for a J8 team, and I think there was 2 internationals on the pitch, right? It was. I tell you a couple of things. One, senior players came down, they played rugby, they played junior rugby, and they always came down and played it, right? And they loved it. And you'd get guys in their 30s, 40s, and even, you know, the odd 50-year-old, Joe Devine. I think he retired at 54, 53, El Presidente, would still get down and play, and you'd still want to play. That doesn't really happen as much. And those guys would tend to lead a team and bring a team together. I also just think, similar to most clubs, like if rugby was your thing, it was your thing. So you're training and a match, and you probably didn't do much else, you know, like that. You know, nowadays, like I remember sort of for the tail end of when I was being a captain, you know, you'd ring a guy and he was in fucking Barcelona for the weekend. Like, sweet mother of God, you know, it changed. Fair play to it and all that. It's totally different now. It's a totally different lifestyle, and you got to be flexible with it, you know. But back then it was totally, you know, 20 years ago, and it's not that long ago, right?
Absolutely, and successful as well. The year I left school, Greystones were in a Cup or League final for every team: J1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and the seniors won the AIL. Like there's a trophy every season. I think it's safe to say, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I don't think we're alone with being in that position then. I think player numbers are declining across the sport anyway, and it's my biggest fear is that rugby turns out like American football, to be honest. I still genuinely feel there is a place for players who just love the game and just really aren't that arsed about playing at a higher level, or, you know, just want to play a bit of ball. Whether that becomes a tens game or something like that, but it's definitely changed, and you know, young guys when they come up, they're not as committed at 21, 22 to play a bit of social. The guys playing for the first are still incredibly committed, but if they're not playing for the firsts, there isn't that same player numbers. It's no doubt about it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Back then, like, matches on the pitch, it was, you know, maybe not as dynamic as it is today, but it was.
That's a horrendous allegation. That's a horrendous allegation. Yeah. We were the barbarians of rugby.
That's right.
The J4 barbarians.
Yeah, that's right.
Self-christened. You know, spaces, not faces, as we always used to say. No, we couldn't even run that fast.
But certainly, like the toughness of the games, like there wasn't the same respect towards obeying the laws as perhaps there is now.
I think the laws were different.
Yeah, but like, I mean, I can remember fights. I mean, do you remember Gareth Dingemore's fight after a game? Do you remember that one?
I'd never besmirch the great name of Lord Stingemore. But I do remember somebody similar to Stingy being in a fight at the end of a match, all right, after he felt particularly aggrieved that somebody knew what they did in the middle of a match. But there would be plenty of similar incidents. I had the odd suspension myself, Jeremy, over the course of my career, and I'd say most of the guys I play with have had a few weeks out on holiday from the team. But you're right. It was a much again, I'd like to say I'm still playing and I'm only in my very, very, very early 40s when I keep looking back to times like this. It was definitely things would be tolerated, and within the rules, I'd say as well. Like, you could give a guy a few stripes for the showers back then, and it was quite legal. You definitely can't do that. You'd probably be taken away in handcuffs. And certainly if you got involved in a bit of fisticuffs, you'd probably be told to calm down, or you concede a penalty. Nowadays, you'd just be straight reds.
Red, yeah, absolutely.
Which is probably right. I mean, the game is expanded in terms of trying to get people to play it, so people just don't want that type of stuff in it. I mean, if you ask anyone playing Guinness, playing the Guards, there's a couple of teams out there that Millmount House. Like, sometimes we forgot to play rugby. It was pretty good stuff. But I also remember we actually had a 0-0 draw with a team called Unidare, which, you can imagine having a 0-0 draw on a rugby pitch. I don't think the ball made it into either 22, but anyway, we met lumps out of each other. But it was definitely, there's no doubt about it. But I'd also say, to be honest with you, the skill levels aren't as high either, so the ball tended to be a lot closer to the breakdown a lot more.
Okay, right.
I mean, Rodolfo Soriano Ano was superstar of the J4 team at centre. That speaks volumes. If I compare that to the centres I was playing at when we won a league 2 years ago, the likes of Matty Dalton and Sebastian and people like that. I think it's a more flowing
totally
style of rugby.
Yeah. I remember you said once team selection. You said, "Will Rodolfo offer to play centre, and how quickly can we change the subject?"
You see, you have to understand, Rodolfo was the cultural icon of the team. He was also our sous chef, and arrived with some pretty fantastic Spanish food. So you had to keep him on board. But like myself now, his best days as a player had probably passed him. And we're never sure when his best days as a player were, but he's going to kill me for this, by the way. Yeah, we did try and encourage him to go into the pack now that sort of as he got into his early 40s, maybe it was time to consider a move into back row with his sort of well-renowned defence and style of play. But no, he persisted in playing centre. We're not sure if it was the hands, the speed, or the boot that made him think he should play there, but he had none of those three. Rodolfo, I'm so sorry because you're one of the best guys I've ever played.
Oh, he is, absolutely. Actually, I'd love to have Rodolfo on as a guest. I think it'd be
you definitely should, but you need Paul Lennon to translate for him because nobody could understand a word of what he's saying.
Oh, God. Well, I'm going massively off topic here, but
don't worry about it.
To try and bring it back, you became a pretty integral part of the junior section after a couple of seasons. My first ever experience with you was.
Are you going to talk about the chip penalty? Are you?
Yeah, we were playing Monkstown at home. Well, we were playing Monkstown at home on the main pitch, and you'd played for the J4s the night before. Or the afternoon before. So this is a Sunday for the J3s.
Allegedly. I was for the J4s to be able to play J3. Yeah, gotcha.
Old Paul Murray making another appearance in the front row for the J4s. But you said to Perkins, who you were subbing for, you said, if you get injured, I swear to God, and you had a paper in your hand, very Financial Times or something like that. Said,
no, Sunday Times.
You said, I'm reading this in the stands and I'm not coming on until I'm finished. You weren't even joking. I don't even think it was supposed to be funny.
I tell you what, because I actually remember that game, right? And I thought this was another one where you pushed me over. Remember?
No, this is the same game.
Oh, is it?
It is. Yeah. Sorry. So you sat up on the stands. I remember looking over a kickoff. I was 19. I was brand new to junior rugby. I said, "What is going on? Your man's in the stands." You'd both feet up on the seats in front of you, in your boots, full gear, scrum cap on, reading the paper, not looking at the match.
And, that's different, mate. And so bad.
After 2 minutes, Perkins got injured.
Of course he did, because that's what I knew was going to happen.
You were furious. I mean, it wasn't like you were like, a bit annoyed now, I have to play. You were angry because you hadn't read the paper, you hadn't warmed up. Oh, you were so annoyed.
Probably very hungover as well, Jeremy.
Yes, I can imagine so.
Sunday morning. Yeah.
And you came on for the first scrum and you're effing and blinded, bloody Perkins, lazy bastard.
Oh,
and I said, what is going on? Who is this guy? And about midway through the match, we were losing as games I was involved with tended to go, and we were absorbing pressure and we were defending. Finally, we won a penalty, and you bent down to do a quick tap, and right. I just in my head I'm thinking, let's clear it, let's get some territory. We've been in our half so long.
So I line, mate. At the line of my sights.
I instinctively just pushed you, and before you were able to tap it, you fell over it.
It wasn't elegant.
Forward. Yeah, it wasn't the most graceful of
no, it wasn't. Yeah.
But I remember everybody.
People laughing.
People turning to me. I was a 19-year-old kid, and they, who do you think you are? Rory Hanlon, who was on the wing, ran the whole way across the wing, and he said, "Never ever do that to him again." I said, "What?"
That's so fun.
Who is this guy? Do you remember that match?
I do. I remember it so well. I was there going, "Who's this little, what?" Second.
That attitude didn't change.
Listen, to be fair to you, then I went, at least you've got a bit about you. I always liked you as a 9 because you were tough and you didn't take it from anyone. But I do remember that. I also do remember getting a call for that match and thinking to myself, that's fine, sub and front row cover, no problem, right? Probably won't have to go on. I can just get down and maybe have a coffee and make up the numbers and all that. And then I realised Perkins was starting, and I know Perkins since we're about we were playing school all the way up in school together. And then I realised he was on. And I went, oh God, Perkins would be fucking going down after 2 minutes now, and I have to go on. So I said to him, listen, pal, I swear to God, I'm not in the mood for this today. You just none of this calf injury or fucking hamstring you're going to pretend after you don't fancy it. And lo and behold, there it was. I didn't even get to the Sunday Times magazine. Yeah.
Oh,
through the sport. Anyway.
But that would like. I
mean,
that
do
was part
remember of you pushing me over as well.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that was part of the fun back in those days. I mean, it was player driven, wasn't it? I mean, I don't know would someone get away with that necessarily nowadays, or would it be looked at as kind of funny or a bit of crack? Like it was
in pushing or reading the paper.
No,
just
on the bench? Like being a character and being able to literally read the paper in the stands as the match goes on.
I'd say you get away with it, but look, I'll be honest with you. Like, if you wanted to have junior teams, I don't think and like we're down to now first J1s, J2s. Back then, like we didn't really have managers. Jeremy, do you remember? Like you were captain of J3s, you were the bloody manager,
by
probably
myself.
the physio,
kit
man, the works. You took the whole thing on. And likewise for the fours, even though there was a cabal of us all, like there was no coach. Like I don't remember who trained us for a while.
There wasn't a coach. No.
I know I tried to abandon training on at least 5 or 6 occasions on the basis that I would only tell Barry Keeley, who I was trying to pull out of the retirement, to play for us, right? So I didn't want them. I had to sneak lads around the back.
I remember one of my first training sessions, and you were there, and Finno was the coach.
Oh, Jesus. I'll be careful now.
you and Stephen Gillespie, Giller, you were like, we were doing a tackle drill holding the bags, and every time either one of you were holding Giller's bag, and every time he tried tackle, you'd move it and he'd fall in the mud, and then he'd do the opposite. And then Finno turns around and he says, right, Stephen Gillespie and Niall Savage, you're off to do a lap. And then you turned around to him and you said, but it's J4s.
This is what we're supposed to. This is far better, far more important to build team morale than to get fit.
You also told many a ref. You also told many a ref it's only J4s. Would you calm down?
I did remember that. Everyone chill. I remember because my favourite. I used to try and get my win between scrums, and I always felt, look, they can't. Not that I did much between them anyway, but they can't start the game without me. And I'd always the ref be, come on, tight head, for God's sake, and I'd be like, look, chill, nice J4s. We're only here to have a bit of skit. I always felt with the J4s, and I think every team needs it, and I actually think people want a bit of ball, right? Is actually, it should be a night for fitness if you want it, and a match. And I don't think you need a load of coaches. It's mostly for guys who played the game since they were kids. They've got kids themselves. They don't have the time commitment. The team will sort itself out. Like, I used to spend most of Thursday. I remember having this row with Nobby, and I know you get into it as well, sort of ducking out the back of work, trying to organise a team for Saturday, and sure, you wouldn't even, and that was the fun. And then you'd go play your match. You'd make sure you'd the same line out calls for about 25 years. If you threw a move in, X ball was the sort of the elaborate, sort of sophisticated move to try and get right for the semi-final. So you didn't really need it. And I think that a lot of the older players probably don't play because they don't want to, coach, and they've got kids. They want a bit of flexibility. I think if you just had a match on the Saturday, they'd probably all still want to play, to be honest.
Absolutely,
that was my sweet spot. I was captain of a team for about 6 years, and I always told the lads, look, you don't have to train. Just make sure you don't let us down when you're playing, because once you get out there and they're good players, they'll sort it all out. And that was the best teams to play in, to be honest with you. Now, when you move up a level, like when Roche and Sully took that J3 team that I was involved in 2 years ago, and we won the league. Like, to play at that standard, those guys were much younger. You needed, they were super, and they were, and even the older heads like Mako went, no, we actually have to follow what they're saying here, because we have no hope otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree. Like you said, you were captain for 6 years, maybe more behind the scenes. Kind of, you're the Dominic Cummings of the junior section, I think.
Well, I only took over from others. There was people before and there's people after. So I suppose, before me, it was, as you say, Willie and Dwayne, and they started fizzling away, and they play a few more games. But then it was myself, the likes of yourself and Carlos and everyone else, and obviously Dooler and Olin and Podge and all had the J2s and Hoppo and lads like that, So, I mean, just generation.
Would that be something like, because like when I was captain, I would try and think along the lines of what you would have done. I learned from the teams that you had captained, in terms of trying to build, a bit of crack and things like that. Like, so I literally copied you and did match reports
They were deadly, mate. Yours were super. Your match reports were excellent.
I don't know. I always loved yours. Heavily embellished when it came to your touches of the ball.
My own personal contributions to the match.
Yeah.
I do remember my 25-yard splash.
Yes, yeah. You said it was either a 50-yard dash from halfway or a flop over the line. I can't remember. But were you taking on? Were you trying to emulate anybody else? Or were you putting your, like, wine and cheese, another thing? Like, that was so successful. Like, you know.
Yeah, that was brilliant. God, I love that. That's exactly what I'll be doing once this interview goes. In fact, just peer over here. It's just waiting for me, right? Anyway, I know. I tell you, I think you kind of make the best of what you got, right? Yeah. So obviously, you're trying to pick up from other people, but things had moved on. And I remember, like, the first couple of teams I was involved in, we weren't particularly successful, but actually it was probably the happiest teams I played with. Sometimes they come up on Facebook, you see the teams from sort of 07, 08, the likes of, Willie Byrne, Stingy, Colin Costello, obviously Rodolfo, Ricky, all the boys, and Trev Martin, everyone. And, we didn't train or anything like that. But actually what we were trying to do, I knew shag all about rugby. I wasn't a great player, knew I wasn't, could hold up a scrum. So I wasn't going to exactly be imparting my years of wisdom or anything like that. And they just told me to sod off because I knew it was shite anyway. Excuse my French, you may have to beep that one out. So what do you try and do? You try and, I suppose, why was I playing and why did I enjoy it? And that was really it. And so you made it a load of crack. Myself and Rodolfo and Ricky were obviously into the old tapas and the old wine. So we made that a part of it. And it just became something. There was a guy called Colgo before me. He used to do the Hawaiian shirt nights. Do you know what I mean? Willie always had the bongo drum. Richie Power had the guitar. There was different things for different, defined different teams. And I suppose for a couple of years, we were sort of a very aristocratic wine and cheese team that weren't, that we sort of moved on. I think that kind of attracted players in then, because everyone thought, we're having a bit of crack. And then once you get one, and like I remember the big game changer for us was when Neil McGannity dropped down,
Yes.
Like that just changed, that just moved it. And like back
talk to me a bit about that. I mean, like, that was 2012. I
don't want to praise Neil McGannity, mate. That would just Jesus, can you
imagine? But just in general, like, I think that's the best junior team that's ever been assembled from certainly in my 15 years.
Yeah.
2012.
Yeah, easily, much better than anything Nobby put together, by the way. Like I would say, in Ireland, probably the greatest junior team of all time.
You won the league, the Invincibility. You won every single game. Like, what was that? Just, you think, coincidence? Neil McGannity decided he wanted to play a bit of junior rugby, and that brought a lot of guys with him, or was there? I was unfortunately the J3 captain that year.
I feel so bad about that, Jerry. I still, when I look at you, I remember your frustration as we be wheeling out players left, right.
Yeah, there's
give us a centre
somewhere.
I know. Chip on both shoulders. You're well balanced.
Yeah, you're right.
But you kind of get a snowball. I think at the time that J2 team was breaking up, so. We were getting sort of an over the hill version of Ronan O'Toole, before he started dyeing his hair. And then you had Podge, Podge, who was the player we really wanted. Obviously, we just took Dooler to get Podge. Came with them, and obviously Lyle had been coming down a bit. Lyle was a superstar, so we got that great back row team in, and then McGann knew them, and then Nobby came. I think they got Rowan Willis in. Harnick came, exactly. Richie Mooney came out of nowhere that season. Danny McQuaid. And then, like, you get players like Nathan Buick were dropping in.
Yeah.
Do you remember McKechnie came out for a few games? Like, at one stage, we were trying to cool the jets because we were winning by so much. We were starting to get in trouble with the boys up in the bar, And Mary's actually lodged a complaint against McGannity. Yeah. So, which was probably right, but I'm sure it was nothing to do with his rugby ability. But I think they thought he was still a first team player.
Is that the best team you're on?
Yeah. I mean, like, in terms of talent, like, I was a total passenger in that team. I only got to play because I picked the team. Actually, Ken Doherty was actually captain. I was vice captain. Totally. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, I remember, beating Mary's 51-3 and stuff. It was just crazy. I mean, there was guys coming up and asked for a game, and you were kind of going, I was actually trying to preserve my own spot in the team at that stage. But it was crazy. Having said that, and it was great, but in terms of playing rugby, like, it wasn't the most enjoyable year I've had. And I loved the guys, I loved it. But on a personal level, like, sure, hardly got to touch the bloody ball. McGann would be going 30 yards ahead and offload to the lads, and sure, I was sort of trying to keep up. That was classic when the scrum was the only time I got to, I don't get a touch of the ball during the scrum. In fact, they used to try and skip me all the time. I know Nudge did, because it was the only time he could actually pass more than 2 yards. Just to skip me and hit Dula. So yeah. Yeah, go on.
No, that season where I was the J3's captain, and we lost, I think, the first 5 matches, and it was really weighing heavily on me. Like, it meant so much. I'd no job, I'd no girlfriend, I was in college. It was just, rugby was the most important thing in my life by a million miles.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, but like we lost the first 5 games in a row, I think, and I was taking it so personally. And you texted me and you said, you said in your text, I lost the first 5 games of my captaincy as well. Keep the chin up, and it made such a difference to me. It was like that arm around the shoulder really kind of buoyed my spirit. So thank you for that.
No, listen, mate, and to be honest with you, like, I remember that, and I remember getting worried that people had stopped taking my call. Like, I remember that at the start, and that's when I started. That's probably when I started bringing free booze to everyone to make sure they showed up.